The Primitive Advantage. Chapter 1. The Perfection Trap. The silence in the containment cell was not a natural silence. It was a heavy, pressurized vacuum of sound, broken only by the microscopic hum of the energy field that served as their door. Silas Vance sat on the floor, his back against a wall that felt more like frozen light than solid matter. He rubbed his prosthetic steel finger, the dull metal clicking rhythmically against his thumb. The air here was too clean. It lacked the comforting scent of grease, recycled sweat, and scorched copper that defined his life on the salvage rig. It smelled of nothing, a clinical, terrifying void that made his lungs ache.
Stop pacing, Mina. You're wearing out your boots, and we don't have spares in the budget.
Silas said, his voice raspy from the dry, filtered atmosphere. He didn't look up, but he could feel the vibration of her footsteps through the floor.
There are no seams, Silas. No bolts, no wiring, no control panels. It's like they grew this room out of a single piece of glass. How are we supposed to work with this? I'd give my left kidney for a loose screw right now.
Mina Rossi replied, her voice echoing sharply against the curved walls. She stopped, staring at the shimmering blue curtain of the energy field. Her hands were buried deep in the pockets of her work vest, her fingers twitching with the phantom urge to dismantle something.
That's the point. The Xylanthi don't do loose. They don't do friction. They've spent 10,000 years weeding out the messy parts of physics. To them, we aren't just prisoners. We're biological anomalies in a perfect system.
Silas closed his eyes, visualizing the Xylanthi ship they had seen before being boarded. It was a needle of white light, elegant and terrifying. There were no visible engines, no thrusters, just a smooth hull that defied every law of aerodynamics he knew. He thought about his own ship, the Rust Bucket, currently being towed or dismantled. It was held together by hope, duct tape, and a series of complex bypasses he'd designed himself. It was ugly, but it was understandable. This place? This was a nightmare of efficiency.
They didn't even take my multi-tool, Silas. You know why? Because the warden looked at it like it was a piece of sharpened flint. He actually laughed. Well, his skin turned that weird, sparkly pink color. He thinks there's nothing in this room that a primitive can manipulate with a physical tool.
She spat, pulling the small, battered tool from her belt and flicking it open. The metallic snick of the blade felt like a revolutionary act in this silent tomb.
Your assessment is accurate. Small 1.
A voice vibrated through the air, seemingly coming from the walls themselves. It wasn't a sound made by vocal cords, but a frequency translated into their minds. A figure appeared on the other side of the energy field. The Xylanthi warden stood 7 feet tall, its 4 spindly arms folded behind its back. Its translucent skin was a calm, condescending blue, and its multifaceted eyes shifted like spinning jewels.
Physics has evolved beyond your comprehension. You are contained by quantum cohesion. There is no lever long enough to move these walls.
The warden continued, its bioluminescence pulsing with a slow, rhythmic light that felt like a mockery. Silas stood up slowly, his joints popping, a sound that made the warden's eyes flicker in brief, alien disgust.
You know, I've seen perfect systems before. Back on Earth, we had a saying about things that couldn't break. We said they just hadn't met the right idiot yet.
Silas leaned against the wall, his steel finger tapping a specific spot near the floor. He had been watching the way the air moved in the room. Even in a perfect system, you had to breathe.
Humor is a defense mechanism for the obsolete. Remain silent. The collective will decide your utility soon.
With a final, shimmering pulse of violet light, the warden turned and glided away, its feet barely touching the floor. The silence returned, heavier than before. Mina kicked the wall, the dull thud of her boot sounding pathetic against the alien tech.
Obsolete. I'm going to shove that word down his glowing throat. Silas, we're stuck. Even if I could short the field, I don't have a power source. I don't even have a wire.
Silas didn't answer immediately. He was kneeling now, pressing his cheek against the floor near the back of the cell. He felt it, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement of air. It wasn't a vent in the traditional sense. It was a microporous membrane designed to filter CO2 and pump in oxygen based on the pressure differential in the room.
Mina, come here. Give me that multi-tool and that piece of gum you've been chewing for the last 3 hours.
He whispered, a sharp, dangerous glint appearing in his tired eyes.
The gum? What, are we going to stick them to death?
She asked, but she was already moving, handing him the tool and spitting the wad of grey gum into his palm.
The Xylanthi forgot something, Mina. They think everything is energy. They think everything is a code. But air is a fluid, and fluids follow the rules of pressure. If I can block this intake membrane, the system's AI is going to see a pressure drop. It'll try to compensate. It'll open the emergency physical bypass to prevent us from suffocating.
Silas began to carefully smear the sticky gum over the microscopic pores of the floor membrane, using the flat of the multi-tool blade to press it deep into the surface. His heart hammered against his ribs. It was a gamble, a primitive, messy gamble against the most advanced civilization in the sector.
You're trying to give the ship an asthma attack.
Mina realized, a grin spreading across her face. She watched as Silas took a small piece of foil from a snack wrapper in his pocket and laid it over the gum, creating a makeshift seal.
Exactly. Their AI is too smart for its own good. It won't think sabotage. It'll think mechanical failure. And when it opens that bypass, we'll have ourselves a hole.
For several minutes, nothing happened. The silence persisted. Then a low, guttural groan vibrated through the floor, a sound of metal protesting against metal. It was the first dirty sound they had heard since their capture. In the ceiling, a hidden panel began to slide back, revealing a dark, narrow shaft. It wasn't an energy field. It was a physical maintenance duct.
Silas, you beautiful, cynical bastard. It worked.
She whispered, looking up at the dark opening.
Don't thank me yet. Now we have to climb into the guts of this thing without getting electrocuted by something I can't even see.
Silas grabbed the edge of the opening, the cold metal feeling wonderful against his hands. He pulled himself up, his muscles straining. As he looked into the dark, oily interior of the ship's maintenance layer, he felt a surge of familiar confidence. The Xylanthi had a god complex, but Silas Vance had a wrench, and in a universe of perfect machines, the man with the wrench was king. Chapter 2. The Percussive Protocol. The maintenance duct was a claustrophobic nightmare of glowing fiber-optic cables and humming energy conduits. It wasn't designed for biological life, let alone 2 humans covered in sweat and grease. Silas led the way, his broad shoulders scraping against the smooth, iridescent walls of the shaft. The air here was thick with the smell of ozone and a strange, sweet scent that reminded him of rotting flowers, the smell of Xylanthi coolant. Every few seconds, a pulse of light would ripple through the cables, momentarily blinding him.
Silas, my skin is crawling. It feels like 1,000 tiny ants are biting me. Is this radiation? Tell me it's not radiation.
Mina whispered from behind him, her voice tight with anxiety. She was holding her multi-tool like a talisman, her knuckles white.
It's just static, Mina. The ship's internal sensors are trying to figure out what we are. To the AI, we're probably just 2 very large, very warm dust bunnies. Keep moving. We need to find a terminal that isn't made of pure light.
Silas grunted, pulling himself forward. He reached a junction where 4 ducts met. In the center sat a floating, crystalline sphere, a sub-processor for the deck's environmental controls. It was flickering, a jagged red light stabbing through its usual calm blue glow. The ship was already struggling with the asthma attack Silas had induced in the cell.
Look at that. It's glitching. The perfect system is having a panic attack because of a piece of gum.
Mina said, a small, triumphant smile breaking through her fear. She reached into her vest and pulled out a strip of conductive foil she'd salvaged from a ration pack.
Don't just admire it, Mina. Do your thing. If you can bridge the data flow in that sphere, we might get a map of this floating palace.
Silas watched as Mina carefully leaned out of the duct, her fingers steady despite the height. She began to weave the foil between 2 of the crystalline facets of the processor. The moment the metal touched the crystal, a sharp crack of blue electricity jumped to her hand.
Damn it!
She hissed, pulling her hand back and shaking it violently. The sphere's flickering intensified, and a high-pitched whine began to echo through the shaft.
Warning. Logical. Inconsistency. Detected. At. Substation. 9. Recalibrating.
The ship's AI boomed, the voice vibrating in Silas's very marrow. Suddenly, a hatch at the end of the junction hissed open, and a small, floating orb drifted in. It was a neural harmonizer, a Xylanthi security drone designed to pacify unruly subjects by projecting calming frequencies directly into their brains.
Subjects, cease. Physical interference. Submit to the harmony.
The warden's voice projected through the drone. A wave of violet light washed over Silas. For a second, his mind went blank. His muscles relaxed, and a terrifying sense of peace threatened to overwhelm his will. He felt his grip on the duct wall slipping.
No, get out of my head,
Silas growled, his teeth bared. He bit down hard on his tongue, the sharp tang of blood and the jolt of pain snapping him out of the trance. He realized the harmonizer was tuned to Xylanthi brainwaves, logical, orderly, and slow. It wasn't prepared for the chaotic, adrenaline-fueled noise of a human mind in fight-or-flight mode.
Silas, it's making me feel sleepy. I can't.
Mina's eyes were glazing over, her hand dropping toward the abyss below the junction. Silas didn't think. He lunged out of the duct, swinging his heavy, steel-fingered hand in a wide arc.
Shut up!
He roared as his metal fist collided with the floating drone. There was a satisfying crunch of delicate alien components. The drone didn't explode. It simply crumpled and spun wildly into the wall, its violet light flickering out. The peaceful pressure in Silas's mind vanished instantly.
Did you just punch a peace drone?
Mina blinked, her senses returning. She stared at the wreckage of the advanced security tech.
It was annoying me. Now the foil, Mina, move!
Silas turned his attention to the crystalline sub-processor. It was now screaming, the red light turning into a blinding strobe. The AI was trapped in a loop, trying to calculate the trajectory of a physical blow it couldn't comprehend. Silas looked at the flickering crystal, then at his own scarred, grease-stained palm. He remembered his first job on the salvage yards, 30 years ago.
This thing is just a fancy engine, and engines only need one thing when they start acting up.
Silas raised his hand and delivered a massive, open-palmed strike to the side of the processor housing. Clang. The sound was deafening in the sterile environment. For a heartbeat, everything went dark. Then the sphere hummed, the red light vanished, and a steady, cool blue glow returned. The high-pitched whine stopped.
Recalibration. Complete. System. Stabilized.
The AI announced, its voice now smooth and calm. Mina stared at Silas, her mouth hanging open.
You just used percussive maintenance on a quantum processor. You hit it, and it worked.
Unthinkable.
The warden's voice crackled through a nearby speaker, sounding genuinely distressed. The bioluminescence in the walls around them began to pulse a frantic, jagged violet.
You have violated the integrity of the core physical force is but not variable in repair protocols. How did the logic reset?
The warden demanded, his telepathic projection filled with a mix of horror and fascination.
It's called a technical tap, Sparky. Sometimes the parts just need a reminder of where they belong. Now, Mina, check that map,
Silas said, wiping a fresh smudge of grease onto his jumpsuit. Mina pointed to a holographic display that had projected from the fixed sphere. It showed the entire layout of the ship, including a direct route to the secondary engine room.
I've got it. But Silas, the warden sounds like he's having a breakdown. I think you just broke his entire world view with one slap.
Good. Let him worry about the philosophy. We've got a ship to sabotage.
Silas looked down at his hand. It stung, but it felt good. The Xylanthi had built a world where nothing ever broke, which meant they had no idea how to fix anything when it did. He started crawling again, a grim smile on his face. They weren't just escaping. They were proving that in a universe of gods, the man who knows how to hit things is the only one who truly understands how they work. Chapter 3. Chemical Sabotage. The deeper Silas and Mina crawled into the Xylanthi flagship, the more the environment felt like the inside of a giant, living lung. The walls of the conduits were no longer rigid. They pulsed with a rhythmic, organic heat. Silas could feel the vibration of the massive quantum engines somewhere far below them, a low-frequency thrum that made his teeth ache. The air was growing stale, thick with the scent of recycled oxygen and the sharp, medicinal tang of the ship's self-cleaning systems.
Silas, I'm melting. My jumpsuit is sticking to me, and I'm pretty sure I've lost 3 pounds in sweat alone. How much further to the engine room?
Mina whispered, wiping a streak of grime across her forehead. She shifted her weight, her knees barking against the smooth floor of the duct.
We're close, but the map says there's a primary atmospheric seal ahead. It's not an energy field, Mina. It's a physical pressure bulkhead. The Xylanthi use them to isolate sections of the ship in case of a hull breach.
Silas replied, his voice muffled by the narrow space. He reached a dead end where a thick, translucent slab of what looked like solidified gas blocked their path. It was a polymer so advanced it was stronger than titanium, yet perfectly clear. There were no handles, no hinges, and no obvious control panels.
Great, a literal glass wall. Let me guess, you're going to punch this one too?
Mina asked, crawling up beside him. She tapped the surface with her multi-tool. The sound was a dull, lifeless thud.
Not this time. This stuff is designed to absorb kinetic impact. If I hit it, the polymer just redistributes the force. I'd break my arm before I made a scratch. We need something that breaks down the molecular bonds. We need an acid.
Silas looked around the small maintenance alcove they were huddled in. On the wall was a small, glowing canister labeled with jagged Xylanthi script. It was connected to a series of microtubes that ran into the ventilation system.
That's their cleaning fluid, right? The stuff that smells like rotting lilies?
It's a high alkaline surfactant, extremely effective at dissolving organic waste without damaging the ship's perfect surfaces. On its own, it's harmless to this polymer. But if we can trigger a violent exothermic reaction...
Silas trailed off, his eyes darting to Mina's vest.
What? Why are you looking at my pockets? Oh, no, Silas, not the snacks.
Mina said, protectively clutching her chest.
Mina, you've got a bag of Terran Inferno habanero crunchies in there. I can smell the vinegar and capsaicin from here.
These were my last luxury. Do you know how hard it is to get Earth snacks in this sector? It's a 3-month salary for one bag.
She protested, though she was already reaching into her pocket. She pulled out the crumpled, bright red foil bag.
Think of it as a contribution to the war effort. Those chips are loaded with concentrated acetic acid, salt, and enough artificial spice to burn a hole through a tank. Mix that with a high alkaline Xylanthi cleaner, and we don't just get a mess. We get a chemical bomb.
Silas carefully pried the canister of cleaning fluid from its housing. He unscrewed the top, releasing a cloud of sweet, cloying vapor. Mina opened her bag of chips, the pungent, spicy aroma immediately filling the duct, making them both cough.
My eyes are watering. If this kills the Xylanthi, it's because they have better taste than we do.
She wheezed, crushing the chips into a fine red powder inside the bag.
Pour it in, all of it.
As soon as the red powder hit the clear blue liquid, the canister began to vibrate. A low hissing sound emerged, followed by a thick, acrid smoke that smelled like a burning spice factory. The mixture began to foam and bubble, turning a violent, angry purple.
Sensors detecting unknown biohazard in Sector 4.
The warden's voice boomed over the internal comms, sounding panicked.
Atmospheric composition is deviating from all known parameters. Toxic, corrosive, volatile. Humans. What have you released?
The alien demanded, his voice cracking with a high-pitched frequency that suggested genuine terror. To a species that lived in a perfectly controlled environment, a simple chemical reaction was the equivalent of a nuclear meltdown.
It's just lunch, Warden. You should try it sometime.
Silas shouted, pressing the bubbling canister against the translucent bulkhead. The reaction was immediate. The indestructible polymer began to hiss and sizzle. The concentrated capsaicin and acids from the Earth snacks tore through the alien molecular bonds like a hot knife through wax. A hole began to melt away, the edges blackened and dripping.
It's working. Look at it go.
Mina cheered, though she had to cover her mouth with her sleeve to breathe.
Critical. Failure. In. Bulkhead. Integrity. Seal. Breached.
The ship's AI announced, its voice distorted by the smoke. With a final, wet pop, the center of the bulkhead dissolved, and the pressurized air from the other side came rushing through, clearing the smoke and pulling Silas and Mina forward into a wide, brightly lit corridor. They tumbled onto the floor, gasping for fresh air. Silas looked back at the melted ruin of the perfect door. The Xylanthi technology was elegant, yes, but it was brittle. It couldn't handle the dirty reality of human chemistry.
We're out. We're actually out of the vents.
Mina said, standing up and dusting off her red vest. She looked down the corridor, which was lined with glowing consoles and floating displays. But her eyes caught something else. A heavy, matte black metal pipe running along the base of the wall. It was a manual coolant bypass, one of the few physical components in the ship.
Look at that, Mina. High-grade industrial alloy. No energy shields, no quantum locks, just a solid piece of metal.
Silas said, walking over to it. He gripped the pipe, feeling its weight. It was cold, heavy, and real.
What are you thinking?
Silas gave the pipe a sharp tug. With his prosthetic finger providing extra leverage, he felt the mounting brackets groan and then snap. He pulled a 3-foot length of heavy metal from the wall. He balanced it in his hand like a club.
I'm thinking that the Xylanthi security drones are programmed to deflect lasers and disruptors. I'm thinking they haven't been hit with a piece of plumbing in 5,000 years.
Silas smirked, his eyes reflecting the flickering lights of the corridor.
They wanted to see our utility. Let's show them what a couple of primitives can do with a lever and a little bit of momentum.
Silas led the way down the corridor, the heavy pipe resting on his shoulder. They were no longer just escaping. They were an anomaly in the system, a physical force that the Xylanthi's perfect logic simply couldn't compute. Chapter 4. The Wrench in the Works. The secondary engine room was a cathedral of impossible geometry. Huge glowing pillars of liquid light stretched from the floor to a ceiling that seemed to disappear into a shimmering haze. There were no gears, no pistons, and no roaring furnaces. Only the low, bone-deep thrum of 1,000 quantum processors working in perfect unison. Silas and Mina stood on a high catwalk, their shadows long and jagged against the pristine, glowing surfaces. Silas gripped the heavy metal pipe he'd ripped from the wall, its weight a comforting anchor in this world of light and ghosts.
It's too clean, Silas. It feels like we're standing inside a giant computer. How do you even sabotage something that doesn't have moving parts?
Mina whispered, her eyes darting around the vast chamber. She was holding a large white canister she'd liberated from a safety alcove, the Xylanthi equivalent of a fire extinguisher, though it hummed with a strange internal energy.
Every system has a bottleneck, Mina, even this one. Look at those pillars. They're cooling units. They keep the quantum cores from melting into a puddle of subatomic soup. If we stop the flow, the whole ship has to shut down to prevent a core collapse.
Silas pointed to a series of crystalline tubes that fed into the base of the nearest pillar. Inside, a pale violet fluid moved with hypnotic grace.
And I'm guessing those tubes aren't made of solidified gas like the bulkhead?
Nope, they're high-pressure glass. Brittle. Perfect for a bit of kinetic intervention.
Silas grinned, but before he could move, a sharp, chirping sound echoed through the chamber. From the shadows of the pillars, 3 security drones emerged. They were sleek, silver discs that hummed with a lethal energy, their undersides glowing with the soft blue light of gravity deflectors.
Unauthorized biological presence detected in critical zone. Initiating neutralization protocol.
The ship's AI announced. The drones tilted forward, and thin beams of concentrated red light began to dance across Silas's chest.
Silas, get down.
Mina screamed as she dove behind a crystalline console. Silas didn't dive. He stepped forward, his boots clanking loudly on the catwalk. The first drone fired, a bolt of searing plasma that hissed through the air. Silas swung the heavy metal pipe with a grunt of exertion. The plasma bolt hit the pipe and splashed harmlessly away, the heavy metal absorbing the heat for a fraction of a second. The drone paused, its sensors clearly confused. Its energy shields were designed to deflect high-velocity projectiles and energy beams by matching their frequency. It had no programming for a slow, heavy, 20-pound piece of industrial plumbing swung by a very angry human.
My turn, you oversized frisbee!
Silas roared. He brought the pipe down in a massive overhead strike. Crack! The drone's elegant energy shield flickered and died as the physical mass of the pipe crushed its outer shell. The drone didn't just stop. It folded like a tin can, sparks showering the catwalk as it tumbled into the abyss below.
Impossible.
The warden's voice crackled over the comms, his tone bordering on hysterical.
The drone had level 9 phase shielding. How can crude iron rod bypass quantum frequency tuning?
The alien demanded. Silas was already moving toward the second drone, which was frantically trying to recalibrate its sensors to account for blunt force trauma.
It's called inertia, Warden. Look it up in your history books.
Silas grunted, sidestepping another plasma bolt. He didn't even use the pipe this time. He simply kicked the second drone with his heavy work boot. The drone spun wildly, its stabilization gyros screaming, and slammed into a cooling pillar.
Silas, the third one is flanking you.
Mina shouted. She popped up from behind the console, holding the white canister like a bazooka. She had stripped the safety seal with her teeth and was holding a small, improvised wire trigger she'd fashioned from her multi-tool.
Eat this, Sparky,
she yelled, pulling the trigger. Instead of a cloud of foam, the canister released a concentrated blast of liquid nitrogen-equivalent coolant. The third drone was instantly engulfed in a freezing fog. The extreme temperature drop caused the drone's hyperconductive circuits to shatter. It froze mid-air, a coating of white frost covering its silver hull, before it dropped like a stone and shattered into 1,000 pieces on the floor.
Nice shot, kid. Where'd you learn that?
Silas asked, breathing hard, his jumpsuit damp with sweat.
Section 4 of the TerraCorp Safety Manual. In the event of a fire, aim at the base of the flame. In the event of an alien robot, aim at the shiny bits.
Mina smirked, though her hands were shaking. She joined Silas at the base of the cooling pillar.
All right, enough playing around. Let's give this ship a lobotomy.
Silas raised the metal pipe and slammed it into the crystalline tubes. The glass shattered with a musical chime, and the violet cooling fluid began to spray everywhere, hissing as it hit the floor. Instantly, the engine room began to change. The steady blue light of the pillars turned a frantic, pulsing red. The low hum of the engines rose to a deafening, discordant scream.
Warning. Coolant. Loss. Detected. Core. Temperature. Rising. Beyond. Safety. Parameters. Manual. Override. Required.
The AI's voice was now overlapping with itself, sounding fragmented and panicked.
Cease this madness.
The warden pleaded.
You are destroying a masterpiece of galactic engineering. Why would you do this?
His voice was filled with genuine grief, as if he were watching a painting being shredded.
Because your masterpiece is a cage, Warden. And humans don't like cages, especially cages that don't have a manual door handle.
Silas replied, dropping the bent and scorched pipe. He looked at Mina, who was already looking at the holographic map.
The primary bridge is 2 decks up. If the engines are failing, the High Commander will have to drop the internal security fields to divert power to the stabilizers. That's our window.
Then let's move. I want to see the look on his face when we tell him his ship was taken down by a bag of chips and a piece of scrap metal.
Silas and Mina ran toward the emergency lift, leaving the once perfect engine room in a state of chaotic, smoking ruin. The Xylanthi had spent millennia perfecting their technology, making it so advanced that it was untouchable. But they had forgotten that the universe is a messy, physical place. And as Silas Vance knew all too well, the more complicated a machine is, the harder it falls when you throw a wrench in the works. Chapter 5. The Manual Override. The air on the bridge was thick with the smell of scorched data nodes and the sharp ozone tang of failing shields. It was a stark contrast to the clinical sterility of the containment cell. The once pristine white walls were now strobing a frantic blood red, and the holographic displays were fractured, showing cascading errors in a language that even the ship's AI seemed to have forgotten. High Commander Jal stood in the center of the chaos, his forearms twitching in a frantic, useless dance over a console made of flickering light. His skin, usually a regal, calm blue, was now a jagged, terrified violet.
The logic is collapsing. The ship thinks the vacuum of space is an internal error. It is sealing the ventilation. To preserve purity, we are suffocating in our own perfection.
The High Commander gasped, his voice thin and reedy. He turned as the heavy bridge doors hissed open, forced apart by the heavy metal pipe Silas had snatched back up from the engine room floor before they fled. Silas and Mina stepped through, looking like two grease-stained demons in a temple of glass. Silas leaned on the scorched pipe, using it as a cane, his breath coming in ragged hitches.
Having a little computer trouble, Commander?
Silas asked, his voice echoing through the panicked bridge. He wiped a smear of soot from his forehead with the back of his hand, his steel finger glinting in the red emergency light.
What have you done?
Zal demanded, his multifaceted eyes focusing on the humans.
My fleet is crippled. My flagship is dying because of snack, food, and blunt force. This is not war. This is vandalism.
It's not vandalism, Commander. It's a reality check. Your ship is so smart it doesn't know how to handle a stupid problem,
Mina said, stepping forward. She pointed to a massive, decorative panel behind the commander's throne. It was etched with the history of the Xylanthi, a beautiful relief of crystalline stars.
That panel, Zal. Behind it is the manual cooling vent for the bridge. If you open it, the heat escapes. The AI resets its thermal sensors, and the life support comes back online.
That is a monument. It has not been opened in 3 millennia. The access codes are lost in the archives. The AI says it does not exist.
The commander cried out, his arms flailing in despair.
Your AI is a liar. It doesn't want to admit it needs a hole in the wall to stay cool. Mina, give me the tool.
Silas commanded. Mina reached into her vest and handed him the battered multi-tool, the only one they had. Silas gripped it, feeling the familiar weight of the Terran-made steel. Silas walked past the commander, who shrank away as if Silas were a plague-bearer. Silas stood before the ancient, beautiful monument. He ran his hand over the delicate carvings, searching for a weakness. He reached deep into the small, hidden pocket of his jumpsuit, the one he used for emergency rations. His fingers brushed against something small, hard, and wrapped in crinkled paper. It was a single, forgotten piece of peppermint gum, dusty and stale, but it was there.
You actually found more? I thought I gave you the last of it back in the cell,
Mina whispered, her eyes widening.
Found a stray in the lining. Guess it's our lucky day.
Silas unwrapped the gum, popped it into his mouth, and began to chew with slow, deliberate intensity to soften the hardened sugar. He spat the grayish mass into his palm and pressed it into a small hairline fracture in the monument's base, a tiny flaw the Xylanthi's senses had overlooked for centuries. He then took Mina's multi-tool and wedged the screwdriver attachment into the same crack, the gum providing just enough grip to keep the metal from slipping against the frictionless alien surface.
You Xylanthi build things to last forever. But on Earth, we know that nothing is truly solid. Everything has a breaking point. You just have to find the right spot to hit.
Silas braced his feet against the floor. He gripped the multi-tool with both hands, his prosthetic steel finger locking into place with a mechanical click. With a roar of effort, he threw his entire weight into a sideways heave. For a second, nothing happened. Then a sound like a gunshot rang out through the bridge. The molecular bond snapped.
Heave, Silas, take the pipe.
Mina yelled, grabbing the metal pipe Silas had been leaning on and jamming it into the widening gap to use as a massive lever. Together, the two humans strained against the weight of 3,000 years of tradition. With a deafening screech of protesting metal, the monument swung outward on hidden, rusty hinges. A blast of hot, stagnant air rushed out, followed by the sweet, cool whistle of the emergency intake.
Thermal. Anomaly. Resolved. Emergency. Venting. Active. System. Rebooting.
The AI's voice returned to its calm, melodic tone. The red lights faded, replaced by a soft, steady white. The screen stabilized. The ship stopped screaming. High Commander Zal slumped into his throne, his forearms hanging limp at his sides. He stared at the ruined monument, at the piece of gum stuck in the crack, and at the two humans who were breathing heavily, covered in the dirt of his perfect world.
You broke the unbreakable.
No, we just opened a window.
Silas said, wiping the sweat from his eyes. He stood tall, his rugged jumpsuit a sharp contrast to the glowing elegance of the bridge.
Now, Commander, here's the deal. You're going to release our ship. You're going to give us safe passage back to Terran space. And you're going to pay for the vandalism by giving us a full cargo hold of those crystalline processors. They make great paperweights.
Why should I agree?
Zal asked, a hint of his old pride returning.
Because, Commander.
Silas leaned over the commander's console, his shadow falling over the alien.
We're the guys who know how to break your toys. And next time, I won't use a piece of gum. I'll bring a hammer.
2 hours later, the rust bucket was drifting away from the Xylanthi flagship. Silas sat in the pilot's seat, his feet up on the dashboard, which was held together by a series of mismatched screws and a very important piece of duct tape. Mina sat next to him, happily crunching on a new bag of snacks she'd found in the salvage bay.
You know, Silas, they're never going to forget us. We're probably going to be the monsters in their ghost stories for the next millennium. The primitives who hit the God machine.
Let them tell their stories, Mina. As long as they remember the lesson.
Silas said, looking out at the stars.
Which lesson is that?
That perfection is a trap. It makes you soft. It makes you forget that the universe is made of stuff. Hard, heavy, messy stuff. And as long as there's a human with a tool and a bad attitude, no machine in the galaxy is truly invincible.
Silas reached out and tapped a flickering gauge on his dashboard. Clank. The needle jumped back to the correct position. He smiled. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't quantum. But it was human. And in a galaxy of perfect failures, that was the ultimate advantage.